And good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this morning. This morning's webinar is the more you know after the mandate. And again, good morning, everyone. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We're in webinar format today. So we are, all of our attendees are off camera and muted. And you'll only see our panelists today. And with that, I'd like to welcome everyone from the Hometown Association of Realtors, the Illini Valley Association of Realtors, the Oak Park Area Association of Realtors, and the Quincy Area Association of Realtors. We appreciate you coming on early on a Monday. And so I'd like to thank our staff at all four associations, Heather Wiedrick, and Jay Walton and Sharon Halpern, our AEs at Oak Park, Quincy, and Hometown with us today. And thank you for joining us on a Monday morning, bright and early. Sunny here in my part of Illinois, so hopefully it's a beautiful day wherever you are. Just a quick introduction. I won't belabor this because most of you know me already. I'm a managing broker and speaker, trainer, mentor, coach. And I have my share of accreditation, so I won't belabor those. I think most of you know me. Suffice to say that I've been very involved in our association. Give me 1 second. All right, so let's start our program. So let's talk about the after the mandate. We are obviously going on 45 days post August 17th. So hopefully everyone was aware of the significance of that date.
I'm good, yep. All right. I just got your name.
And so we're gonna kind of talk about today what's going on since then. Today we're going to continue to build our understanding and our approach to how to navigate the post-settlement mandate landscape. We know that buyer agency, broker agreements, and business practices as a result are here to stay. And today we're going to talk about, again, sort of where we are. And we're going to talk about some of the resources and a little bit about what we're seeing out in the landscape. As always, I have some housekeeping to cover. So today we're going to work to talk about how we arrived where we are, how to discuss and articulate what's happening with our buyers and the public, provide guidance on what things look like since the effective date, to bring some resources to help us with our value proposition, and to continue to discuss why the sky is not or didn't fall. Quick rundown on where we're gonna go today. We're gonna quickly get through the housekeeping. We're gonna cover disclaimers, a few opening thoughts, and then we'll get into current insights and cover some resources, look at just touching on the forms landscape, the MLS landscape, consultation, thoughts, ideas, and talking points. Of course, we'll touch on professional development briefly, office policy, and then we'll close out for today. So, and then we'll, as always, for those who have participated in our The More You Know programs, we hold and try to cover questions at the end. So we will have staff monitoring the questions, and then we will work to answer those at end, and we will stop the recording for the Q&A portion. So we've got a few disclaimers to cover as always. First, the antitrust, couple session disclaimers, brief mention of opinions and thoughts. So starting with our antitrust statement, hopefully everyone understands and has seen this. I'm going to leave it up there for a few seconds. If you're not aware, we are in the room today with other real estate brokerages, and as such, being competitors and having to compete, we do also have to avoid anti-competitive and antitrust behaviors. So everyone here knows, everyone gets to, and I'm talking to mostly my managing brokers here, independent business decisions for your individual companies. And but for all of us, we need to avoid the conversations about fees, commissions, splits for company licensees, denigrating other business models, including or boycotting other competitors. And then, of course, we know we must comply with the law and our ethics. And while we can all gather to discuss, the impact that things have on our industry, that we have to avoid anti-competitive and antitrust behavior. Just letting you know, the session is copyrighted, and course materials may not be reproduced without the permission of yours truly as author. And also, if anyone would like any of the materials, I can pull text from my presentation, and I'm happy to email you information. I'll give you my contact information again at the end. Also, we conduct our sessions in a business recruiting free environment, so we do not allow recruiting during our sessions. So please refrain. And again, to mention it, we don't compare brokerage models or make any efforts to portray one model as superior or inferior from other models. Doing that in these courses is prohibited, and if we see that, we will remove our patrons from the session. As always, I have my own opinions, as does everyone. I will use my opinions as examples sometimes throughout the sessions to help to illustrate or get a point across, but in no way are my opinions to be considered the only solutions or methodologies to conduct business or to create policy. So please know that. And as always, for our broker licensees, please do consult with your sponsoring or managing brokers when it comes to your particular office's policies or business practices. All right. In general, as always, I hope that the session will inspire greater discussion at your respective brokerages, that today's topics are things that can no longer be ignored. Hopefully everybody understands that at this point, almost 45 days post mandate. The time to address business practices is now. It actually was, but for those of our brokerages that have yet to address their policies and practices, you need to get that done. And it's a time to be proactive, not reactive. So, we all should understand the landscape a little bit better now and set policies and practices accordingly. And I do always like to mention that we have to stop saying out here or over there. We cannot treat our clientele across the state of Illinois differently. We have to treat them the same, irregardless of their geography. So when it comes to market specific behaviors, please examine your practices and make sure that you are giving your clients and the members of the public the full breadth of your service, regardless of geography, and treat them all the same and fairly. All right, before we get into the program, a few opening thoughts. Obviously, we're all still here. So what we were saying pre-mandate, that the sky was not falling. In fact, it did not. We should have hopefully all by now adapted to and be in compliance with the mandate changes. Buyers brokerage representation agreements are here to stay. They're part of the mandate and soon to be part of our license law. MLS rules, MLS rules have taken effect to remove all compensation fields and language. We should have all implemented changes to the listing side as well as the buyer side. And as we've been talking about, the constant change in our forms will continue as our brokerages, franchises, associations bring forms to the market as a result of their compliance with the mandate. NAR Illinois Realtors and your local associations continue to share updates and resources, so please watch your communications from your trade organization. And we also must continue to work on our business practices and skills. And just a reiteration, the settlement was a good thing. And I think that while it's presented us some challenges to adapt and adopt to, from what I can tell, it's been a good thing for both the members and the public. Of course, we get the protection under the settlement. And we'll talk about, again, professional development and using, I guess, this opportunity or time and place in our industry to recognize that we must do better with our professional skills and having strong practices to work with the public. Just a couple specific thoughts. Obviously, our managing brokers should continue to study what's going on and work in their respective brokerages to develop training and business practice and policy. And as always, there are countless teaching moments embedded in my presentation. So I have the little DR star that I call it out in the margin of a lot of these slides. So our DRs take note of those slides and consider whether or not those are teachable moments to take back to your brokerages. In red there, I say, or repeat, as I have in a lot of these sessions, that we have to pay attention to credible information. There's so much hallway chatter out there trying to cloud the information, and we have to make sure that the information we use and digest and use in our practices is credible. All right, let's get going here a little bit. I've shared this slide in virtually every one of our presentations, but I continue to like to share it because a lot of why we are who we are and why we deal with what we deal with is because we are a highly regulated industry. And we have over 15 entities that we have to be in compliance with. So, it's not just the NAR mandate, but it is all these other things that fall up into our structure such that we have to make sure that we are in compliance. And it is a lot. It's a lot to understand, but we are professionals, or should be, when it comes to understanding how all these things, how all these regulatory entities affect what we do, and we need to navigate and stay within those guardrails. What's changing? What's still the same? We know that these are the influences or the drivers in terms of what we're dealing with, or what we've been dealing with over the course of the lawsuit and settlement. The Department of Justice, there is still a lot of swirlings around what's going on in our industry regarding the Department of Justice's inquiry, and NAR is constantly working on this. And in fact, with regards to the agreement that was made and broken by the department, that is still ongoing. Our National Association of Realtors has filed to accelerate or elevate our case to the Supreme Court, and so that will, we'll be watching that as we are. We also know that MLS policy and rules have changed and are influencing our practices in that regard. And then also we know that the Illinois Real Estate License Act is to be updated January 1st to also include the rule for licensees in Illinois that working with the public, we must work with a written brokerage agreement. And that means that we need both listing and buyer brokerage agreements. So the state will align with the mandate effective January 1. There are a lot of other pieces or components to that update. I'll touch on a couple today, but most of those are sort of underneath and not as critically important as knowing that we'll be mandated under the law as well to make sure that we're in written brokerage agreements. So we'll have both the industry regulating that and our license law regulating that. Where we've been, we all know, we remember probably the breaking news statement in March of 24 that NAR had reached a settlement. And we know that that agreement would end all litigations and claims brought on behalf of those as a part of that lawsuit. So we've been there, we've talked about that. We know what the terms are that were agreed to in the settlement. We know that the release of liability is a very important component to the agreement, and it protects virtually all of our members. There were some members that were not included, and some of them have opted in. Others have opted to deal with things on their own if anything were to come of it. And then we've seen the timeline. We know that the sort of remaining piece in the timeline now is the November 26th hearing, where final approval will be made, or hopefully made, and that will conclude the lawsuit. And then we also, as I already mentioned, we are still dealing with the Department of Justice, and that is something that is ongoing, that, and irregardless of what is being dealt with in the now, this is the Department of Justice's job. They're to watch the business and industry of our country to make sure that that they're in compliance with all of the rules and laws. So while this may be what we're dealing with right now, we know that the DOJ is always watching and monitoring what we do. So we need to continue paying attention as those things unfold. The last thing there, of course, treating everyone fairly, as well as taking the time to articulate our value in explaining compensation, MLS policies, how we work and practice, and of course that as realtors, we all believe in home ownership for all Americans, and treating everyone fairly will keep us out of trouble. Mentioned that November 26th, the importance of that date. We all know by now in our MLSs, 0 was and isn't a real number in terms of what used to be the publicized offer of compensation. Now that that is no longer published, we really need to have an approach and belief that when working with buyers, that we have our ducks in a row with our written buyer brokerage agreements, such that if there is or is not, or if there is per se insufficient compensation coming from the listing brokerage to the buyer brokerage, that we have ourselves covered via our brokerage agreement. We have, most local associations have updated their listing agreements to reframe the compensation piece, as well as that transparency. And if our franchise friends out there have their own individual listing agreements, make sure that the compensation piece of your listing agreements is in compliance, such that it is showing strong transparency to the public. And then just know, we talked about our license law changing. The mandate for use of written buyer brokerage or representation agreements pre-existed us. So when we started doing these presentations, 13 other states had already adopted or mandated the use of written buyer brokerage agreements. So the number is at least that will be either 14, and I'm not sure where the other number of states are in the process, and if other states are doing the same, but we're just worried about Illinois. So all right, so right now we know that some of our brokerages are still trying to catch up and keep up with the conversation. Please be focused and be diligent with the conversation. Make sure that you're paying attention. This is a question that must be answered at your individual brokerages, and that is use of exclusive or non-exclusive brokerage agreements, and that is business practice. So you need to work within your office framework to decide what is best for you, or if that is something that your agents are allowed to negotiate and agree to on the behalf of the brokerage with the sellers, the particular sellers. And then also, making sure that our overall office policies have changed to reflect the updates in policy based on the mandate. All right, just a couple things on reminders, I should say, on forms. We know that there is a big difference between disclosures and agreements. And then we also know that per our MLSs, that there is a big difference between concessions and compensation / commissions. So while we are allowed to talk about certain types of concessions a buyer might receive from a seller in our MLSs, they cannot cross the line into the compensation realm. So we have to be specific and stay within the framework. And a lot of this is, as buyer agents, excuse me, we need to be having better conversations with our buyers lenders about concessions and what the tolerance is within a particular buyer's mortgage application, and ultimately their mortgage might allow. So so better conversations with our buyer lenders is kind of the message there. And then training, if we haven't been, and I hope you all have been, seeking out a lot of training or doing a lot of training for your offices, excuse me, that is definitely, now is the time to make sure that our agents, your agents, know how to navigate. We all know that the sort of 80-20 rule. We kiddingly use that rule. That 80% of our agents don't do as much as the other 20%. It's both of those groups that we're concerned about, because a lot of our agents who are not engaged still may not have a good idea as to what's been going on, and a lot of our tenured agents may also be unaware, because they and I kid about it, they think they know it all sometimes, right? So we want to make sure that we, as broker managers or sponsoring brokers, identify those agents who haven't been attending the trainings that have been available, and make sure that we get with them so that they understand how to navigate. And again, this is a reminder that there is still a lot of noise out there. Kiddingly, one of my realtor friends, who's also an instructor, always kids about it, but there is some truth to the fact that our agents, a lot of them, seek information through social media. They belong to groups. Some of those groups call themselves masterminds, and my friend always kids and says sometimes in those masterminds there isn't a master or a mind among them. Really, we need to make sure that we are aware of what our clients are dealing with, and how they are really unaware of what's been going on, or they don't understand it fully. So we need to, be there to clear up the myths and talk through that, and make sure that we, as practitioners, are getting our information from credible sources. And really, we have had some examples of agents really talking out of school in a lot of these online groups. And I got to tell you, because we know this for a fact, because we have examples, that the many of the attorneys who are on the other side of the settlement case are out there trolling our members for non-compliance. And if you're not complying, you are not covered under the settlement, and they're looking for opportunities to take members to task. So please, if you're in those groups, be a better listener than a speaker. Mind what you're saying in those groups. Almost better to say nothing than, and just take it in for what it is, and avoid getting yourself entangled in conversation that could get you in trouble. We know everything that was part of the mandate. I highlighted the last component here, bullet point under the settlement, just as a reminder that we, as buyer brokers and brokerages, cannot receive compensation that exceeds the agreed rate in our agreements. And this is obviously true for listings and working with sellers as well, but it is critical that we understand that we are not allowed to accept compensation that exceeds our agreement. There's been talk about whether or not it's okay for the buyer brokerage to renegotiate a buyer agreement if they're about to write an offer on a property that has a seller that's willing to compensate higher than what's in your agreement. And I don't like that practice because it opens us up to being conceived as what we're doing is self-serving. So we want to be careful in that. I would suggest avoiding that, and making sure that whatever you're putting in your buyer brokerage agreement as far as the compensation that that you will receive from a buyer, that it's based on your value. We all have different value propositions and reasons for what we should be charging in terms of fees to our buyers. So get in line with that, be fair, treat everybody the same. Try not to fall into exercising buyer agreement modifications just because a seller might be offering additional compensation. So just my 2 cents on that. Talking about the Illinois Real Estate License Act and the changes that are coming, as mentioned, January 1st effective. We know that that all brokerage agreements shall be in writing based on Illinois law as soon as that is effective. It is all signed, so it's cleared both chambers in the General Assembly, and it has been signed by the governor. So we are just waiting for that to become effective. We also know that there are several other components within that legislation. That we're increasing the transparency components, in terms of agency and compensation. So that's why those couple bullets are highlighted in red there. Also, failure to have a written brokerage agreement will be grounds for discipline. Do we know what that looks like yet? No, we're not sure what that's going to be because the state hasn't given us that guidance yet. But between our MLS rules and then the state effective January 1, we know that we're setting ourselves up for discipline if we're not compliant. And then lastly, that second to last bullet there, we know that effective next year, and that will be effective in June, at the end of June, I should say, that at that moment, any core CE that our broker licensees take, you will have an additional 2 hours added to your core class for fair housing. So there's that. And then of course there are other nuances. Please look up the law and the changes for yourself, especially our managing brokers. You should know verbatim what's in those changes to the act. So we know we're changing our conversations. We know that buyer representation, brokerage representations must be used, and we must be able to communicate our value propositions. So just kind of pulling that all together to sort of where we started today. Communicate and articulate and dispel myths. We talked about that. What still needs to be done out there? We know that the lending institutions are still working on some of the components as to how to handle allowable buyer side compensation. So, some of our conversations with the title companies or the escrow closers will, we really need to be communicating better with the title company closers once they're assigned to work the closing. So making sure that what's in the contract and what's been agreed to by the parties is allowable, and clear any red flags and red tape on that earlier. And again, it all goes back to working better and having better communications with the buyer's lender. Some of the title procedures as well still need to be updated. Obviously, it's barely been a little over a month now since effective date, so we're still seeing and hearing about some of the challenges that are happening out there. So, pay attention, be better communicators with title and with lender, with underwriter if you have that access, even with appraisers. When we talk about industry specific guidelines and rules that still need to be developed, we know, as one example of that the code of ethics is going to need some updating. We know, I know that the professional standards committee at NAR have already been meeting in advance of the November governance meetings. There is a possibility, I'm hearing, that the code of ethics may not be done and ready January 1. We know that typically when we see the code updated every year, it is always dated January 1st of that given year. But if they're not ready, they're going to roll and release at a later date in 2025. So pay attention to that. We hope we'll know what's happening after the November governance meetings that are a couple weeks away here. We'll have some better guidance after that, but pay attention to what's going on with the code updates and changes. That's kind of what I was talking about there. And then we know that listing and buyer brokerage agreements will continue to be updated as the rules change and evolve. Managing brokers owners, I've already kind of touched on this, but get those policies updated, get your keep going with your training, continue to give your brokerages the tools and support that they need to navigate within the changes. Kind of reiterating that there, and then demand legal compliance from your agents. Make sure that they know that they are, they are subject to these updates and changes, irregardless of whether or not they've been paying attention. And if they are not complying, you've got to take that to task in-house. We've got to own that responsibility for proper training and supervising. We do know that a lot of the complaints that come in from broker licensees are that they're sponsoring or managing brokers are not properly supervising or training. So use that as a note to my DRs that that a lot of our broker licensees feel like they are not getting what they need from us. So work on that in-house training, supervising. That's your responsibility. We know on the listing side, there are policies that we should be looking at on that end as well. Obviously, for those who have been actively listing properties, that the conversation at the kitchen table before the seller signs the listing agreement has changed and evolved. So, again, support your agents with training and understanding and policies as necessary. Make sure that your agents know whether or not it's their decision to negotiate the commission. Some brokerages don't want the agents negotiating. Other brokerages allow for the agents to fully negotiate the commissions. Some are doing sort of a hybrid. Some are asking their agents to consult with managing brokers when they're negotiating with a seller on the commission structure. So just make sure you know what you're doing with that in your respective offices. Just touching on variable rate, variable rate is allowed. And for those that don't know, variable rate, that is when in a listing agreement, there is a sort of like a rate schedule being given to the seller based on certain factors that may come into play with or without buyer brokers compensation, or compensating in terms of co-op. So an example could be, as a listing agent, you're taking a listing at a certain commission rate, but if the buyer's broker or buyer is unrepresented, then you may offer your seller a different rate, or if it's a dual agency, you may do it at a different rate. This is an allowable practice. You just have to make sure that it's done well and that it's done transparently. So just increase your focus on that and institute policy and training where it may be needed. Also, there may be, in terms of allowing a listing agent to negotiate the commissions with sellers, there may be some factors in there when sellers are repeat clients or when a seller is listing multiple properties. So you would want to look at how you're handling those things. And again, part of what we have to do a better job at is being consistent and treating our clients fairly. So we have to be careful when we're doing different things for different members of the public, making sure that it's consistent with policy. And again, policy for when a seller chooses not to offer compensation cooperatively, make sure you know how to handle that. Make sure your agents know how to handle that. And really, this is not just one-sided. This is, making sure your listing agents know how to handle all of this. So lastly, I guess on listing side considerations to discuss, policies on prohibiting buyer agent brokerages of any kind. Under the mandate, this is a rule. We are not allowed to incentivize buyer brokers from the sell side. So make sure that your seller understands that they can still incentivize a buyer, but that they cannot incentivize a buyer's broker. So no more buyer agent bonuses of any kind allowable under the mandate. This is a real this is a spot where we can really get ourselves in trouble. If you continue to offer buyer agent bonuses, you are effectively telling the buyer agent to show your property over other properties. And as the buyer agent, you're effectively saying that you're going to now show a listing because they're offering more compensation. So this is entirely self-serving, and that is why this is no longer allowed under and after the mandate. This is there's a lot here in terms of what the Department of Justice and the class action suit have told us that we can no longer do. So, this is a violation under the mandate provision, and please don't add to the problems. If you are working with your seller to offer incentives to the buyer, here are some ideas that you can talk about with them. Paying closing costs, prepaying association fees or title costs, buying down the buyer's mortgage rate. These are just some of the ideas that we could offer our sellers in terms of thoughts that they can use to incentivize buyers. And I think, we are starting to see a little shift in the market more towards a balanced market. I don't think it's as strong of a seller's market as it's been. Of course, real estate is local, so these things may be or may not be true in your areas, but as we move maybe into a more so of a buyer's market, these things may become important tools that a seller can use to incentivize buyers. Value proposition, we all hopefully do a good job of articulating our value, but we do need to fine tune our practice. We need to fine tune our talking points, include, articulating and discussing the changes in compensation as a result of the mandate, and of course with brokerage agreements. When it comes to the way our listing agreements are now broken down, we've covered this. All of our new listing agreements should be more aligned with the way it's spelled out there under new. It's more of a plus equals than it is a overall compensation, and then agreeing to share a portion of that with a cooperative broker. So we want to make sure that, and we know that our local and state association forms have made the shift to the new. Franchises, if you have your own brokerage agreements, you might want to take a look at that component to make sure that you are making any modifications to stay in compliance with the mandate. If there is no buyer broker representative, or if the buyer seeks no dual agency, you cannot accept that additional compensation. And again, making sure that, of course, unless your agreement says so, but also make sure that, if there's variable rate involved, that you are being fully transparent with the public on that. All right, let's talk about resources. We'll shift out of some of those ongoing lessons into the realm of resources here, things that we have, tools that we have available to us that can help us in our practice. We know that NAR magazine continues to, the online version continues to provide resources to us. Competition.realtor or facts.realtor or NAR.realtor, the facts, those are all pointing to the same place now. So there's resources there that are constantly being updated by NAR. NAR is continuing to put out videos. Recently, I think about a week ago now, we received a post-mandate update from NAR's legal counselor, Leslie Munchow. Also, we have infographics available to us through NAR, through Illinois Realtors / the Realtor Value. Also the way forward, they're kind of rolling all that or pointing that all now to this web page. There are resources there for state specific information. On their legal page, they continue to offer updates as needed. I'm sure we'll be seeing some updates on the license law change going into 2025. And then also MRED has their settlement update page for those on MRED. If you need explanation as to how MRED is flying and navigating that, they're part of the settlement compliance, you can visit that website. And then just kind of a quick glance across those resources. Here's the Realtor Magazine page. Of course, you land on NAR.realtor. The search field is definitely your friend. You can use that search field to identify and find or search for information. The facts at nar.realtor, couple of things drilling into that. Recently, they started offering consumer guides. This is one example of the 10 consumer guides that have now been released to us. This consumer guide is the "Why am I being asked to sign a written buyer's agreement?" So this is a great piece that can go in your buyer consultation packet. It just kind of goes through for, public facing purposes, why we as realtors are asking them to sign a written agreement. As I said, there are 10 of them. That's the first one that was released in August. We also have a guide for them for veteran buyers, a guide for realtor that shows or articulates the realtor's duties to a client, one for open houses, one for offers of compensation, one for negotiating written buyer agreements, a guide to seller concessions. We were just talking about that. A guide to multiple listing services, fair housing, and last week they released a guide to listing agreements. So that one's brand new. We also know that they have scheduled 2 more to be released in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So keep your eye out there. Visit nar.realtor/the facts with a dash. So they've been kind of releasing 1 a week. I'm not sure how long this is going to continue. We just know that they have 2 more scheduled right now. I mentioned videos. There's Leslie Monchow queued up for her most recent video. We should all know about the infographics that we've had available to us through NAR. These are all also great pieces to put in our client packets, either listing or buyer consultation packets, buying a home, selling a home, hiring a realtor, the essential real estate, 3 ways to maximize the value of your real estate agent, local MLS marketplace in action, and the economics of buying a home. I've been using that one a lot in my presentations and also my my Zoom and course sessions to articulate the importance of home ownership and the impact that it has on the local community. We also know that we have additional resources from NAR. These are 2 booklets that are available to us. There's great social media content embedded in these that you can use. Here's the Illinois Realtors webpage, the Realtor Value, and their legal services page, and MRED's settlement update page. All right, so just reiterating, we have to make sure that our conversations get better when we're talking to the public and even to our cohorts. We have to know what we're doing. We have to be professional about navigating these times. We know that this has to be on both sides, both on the sell and the buy side. We have, obviously there's lists of talking points. I'm a huge fan of creating checklists to use for yourself. Obviously that's checklists are great for transaction management as well, but when it comes to having consultations with the public and when it comes to training agents in offices, we need to make sure that our agents understand how to navigate We know that some of our agents, because we're hearing from them, are hung up on some things still. Presenting disclosure, even though not much has changed with agency disclosure, it's kind of in the middle of all this now. So make sure that agents understand and are clear on explaining the agreements. And all these things, yes, they are time consuming, scary, but they are necessary. Keep practicing. Love to role play. That's, find a buddy in the office or do some role play training with your agents in your office. On the buyer agency side, I'm just going to kind of go through some of this quickly. We are in control of how we get compensated. So make sure that, navigating within the transparency of it all, that you take control. We, as licensees, take control of how we work, and make sure that, we look at using talking points with our prospects and our clients. Make sure that they understand and that we can deliver our knowledge to them when it comes to navigating these times. Talk about, negotiating the brokerage fees, and then, talk about, when submitting an offer, the buyer can always ask the seller to compensate. Buyers need to know they have options. We've talked about this a lot. If they're not sure if compensation is being offered, they do have a choice not to see that property. That's up to them. They can pay they have to know that they may be paying the compensation themselves if there is no cooperative compensation coming from the seller. And of course, we want to do everything in writing. We've talked about all of this before. Spending equal time with our sellers as we do, or our buyers as we do with our sellers, going in, sitting down at the kitchen table for a listing appointment, spending that hour and a half that we've always done. Conversely, how much time do you spend with your buyer before showing them houses? We really need to be doing buyer pre-consultations and having, developing and fine-tuning that session. If you're not doing these, you're really not serving the public the same. If you're giving your sellers all kinds of time before they list and you're giving your buyers no time before they buy, you're not treating the public fairly by doing that. You need to be doing better buyer pre-consultations, or just doing that, period, if you haven't been. This is when we set expectations with our buyer clients. So we talk about forms and process, and lending, and working with third-party providers like attorneys, home inspectors, CPAs, appraisers, all those things, all those other third parties that factor into the title companies. We need to give our buyers more of our time. As always, reading forms to the consumer helps us to develop our talking points. We've kind of beat up value proposition, with all of the sessions we've done. Create a pledge of performance. Make yourself competitive and give yourself differentiation and distinction. Explain your services and how you're going to offer them to your clients. On the buyer side, embrace the agreements. Focus on, what is in those agreements. Make sure you can explain everything to your clients. set your value proposition with your client. In other words, if you're working with a buyer, set your value to the buyer, set your value with your seller client to your seller, set that value where it belongs on with one client or the other. Make sure they understand everything we do or we're going to do for them so that they know why we are of value to them. Written brokerage agreements, discuss them. Make sure that you have strong agreement as to what's in them. Make sure you have the signed agreements timely. Obviously, you shouldn't be getting brokerage agreements signed when you're now sitting down to write an offer. You should have the buyer agreements signed at first encounter with the client. So make sure you're doing that. That is what the mandate has asked. That is what license law will demand. We know we need to disclose and be transparent immediately once a member of the public starts talking to us in confidence, or once we start offering them advice. You got to justify it. That's part of your value proposition, making sure that your model is justified. And it creates buyer loyalty and helps them to understand how you get compensated. Just touching on forms quickly, we know that forms are designed by our associations and respective counsel, or they may also be designed by offices, brokerage, and franchises and their respective attorneys. Whatever the forms are that you're using, make sure that that's the policy of the office. Check with your broker. You got to know that you need to be not only compliant with the mandate and license law and all of our other regulatory entities, but there's also E&O, or errors and omission compliance. You want to make sure that what you do with forms is going to be protected under your E&O coverage. Obviously, we know why the forms are what they are. Mandate, the DOJ, license law all factor into how forms are created. Agency and agreements or contracts, we know that there is a difference. Agreements and contracts are different than disclosures. So make sure your terminology is correct. We know that agreements are contracts. Disclosures are just informational, maybe require acknowledgments. We also know that that we have recent updates in forms from Illinois Realtors. These were all the forms that were recently released. If you don't have a knowledge of this, you really need to talk with your brokerage about the forms that you're using. All of these forms have been recently updated. I'm putting this form up because it is the explainer document that Illinois Realtors published when they released all these forms. It gives a good explanation to us as real estate brokers in Illinois as to what each of these forms is for or about. We also know that our local association has obviously usually has forms for us as well. Always check with your local association for what forms that they have and have updated. Real quickly, with the 7.0 or multi-board documents, we know that we have the addendums to be used as well. The addendum to request for the buyer to request that the seller compensate, that is available. But we also know that here's an example of that addendum to include with 7.0 offers. We also know, because I sit on the drafting committee, that the 8.0 is in draft right now. Ideally, that draft will come out right about the beginning of the new year. And we know that that the information in the addendum may likely go into the 8.0 version, but we haven't really gotten to that yet. So that's just initial discussion. But we do know that there are a lot of other things that are going into the rewrite that will be important for us to learn. And obviously there'll be training made available once that comes out. And again, things are still fleshing out in our industry. Forms are being updated. The moral there is to know those forms and be able to explain them to our clients. So when new forms come out, please take the time to read those forms. Don't be reading those forms for the first time when you're sitting down with a member of the public, because that is not being professional. It's our job to know the forms that we're using with and for them. Hard to keep up. Obviously, continuing education, all these things are important when it comes to professional development in this time. Consider designations. I've been sort of touting my core 4 recommendations for NAR credentials. Consider studying and learning about these. We have the ABR and SRS designation for working with buyers or sellers, and we have certifications for negotiating and price strategy. Just remember, you rent the designations with annual dues and certifications you would own after completing that certificate. We've kind of talked about making sure our agents know that they have a place to go to our managing brokers for help. They do still tell us that they have fears and anxiety about some of what's going on. Make sure that you're engaging with them and your business. Read research, join positive discussions, seek out credible information. MLS, we know all the changes that have happened. We know that that the settlement required new agreements between the subscribers and the brokerages. So all those agreements should have been acknowledged by now by all of us as users. Make sure that you have your buyer brokerage agreement signed before you show your buyers any properties. I'm just going to kind of go through this. We've been there. We know that these are the areas that were addressed by our MLS post mandate by removing these fields from the MLS. Those were the fields. Those are all gone now. Don't be creative in publishing compensation anyway. You cannot publish compensation in these locations. Anywhere that syndicates MLS feeds in the MLS, these things include Showing Time and Central Lock. You cannot publish compensation on any aggregation platform. You can publish to your company or franchise branded websites if you so choose. Make sure that we continue to articulate the value of the MLS to our clients. We're only one agent. There are tens of thousands of agents in the MLS participating, and this helps the buyers and sellers work faster, and especially for the sellers, they achieve a higher price by the exposure. Managing brokers, we've covered all these things. Step up, train, policies. Be part of the solution, not the problem. for the agents. You know, make sure that our buyers are choosing what properties they want to see, be transparent, and make sure that we're disclosing everything in terms of compensation. Again, back to the practice of saying out here and over there, we've got to stop that, treat everyone the same and fairly. And at the end of the day, we're already, almost 45 days past the mandate. We know the sky is not falling. It did not fall. We're all still here. So keep on going. DRs, lead to better, have good attitudes, establish policies, provide good training. That's kind of the message there. Training, hold your agents accountable. Make sure that you don't treat all your agents the same, because they are different in terms of where they are in their learning and understanding of all of this. Single them out if you feel they need extra attention. And continue to adapt and deal with the change. Be a brick carrier, help to carry the bricks. Don't be part of the problem. Step up and be part of the solution. So that concludes today in terms of our presentation for you. We'll go ahead and talk about questions if we have any. Anyone who has any questions that they'd like to address offline, please feel free to contact me. Here's my contact information. And then if we want to go ahead and stop the recording and